I'm Elizabeth Stevenson, and as the manager of the Aquarium's Marine Conservation Action Fund, it is my pleasure to welcome you tonight to the Aquarium Lecture Series for our Spring 2016 season. Generous support from the Lowell Institute allows the Aquarium to offer these programs free of charge, and we are grateful for their support each season. So I am here tonight with Liz Cunningham because there is a strong connection between the stories of hope in ocean country and the stories of hope supported by the Aquarium's Marine Conservation Action Fund, or MCAF as we call it. Liz and I were connected initially thanks to the New York Times. Liz saw a feature story in the New York Times on the Marine Conservation Action Fund. She reached out to me driven by her interest in the small-scale community-based programs that we fund that echo the same programs that she profiles in ocean country. And generously, Liz decided that MCAF was the place where she wanted to donate 21% of her profits from her book, and I'll let her explain that percentage when she comes to the podium. A close friendship has quickly developed between us as we recognize that we share a passion and a joy for shining a light on the ocean heroes around the world, people who don't give in to a sense of environmental despair. They don't give up when the odds are against them. They take action and stay hopeful. And Liz and I share a hope that by talking about these conservation leaders, these ocean heroes, audiences such as yourselves, readers of ocean country, school children, college students, will see themselves in these stories and want to follow in these heroes' footsteps. And now to introduce Liz Cunningham. Liz Cunningham's book, Ocean Country, is an adventure story, a call to action and a poetic meditation on the state of the seas. But most importantly, it is the story of finding true hope in the midst of one of the greatest crises to face mankind, the rapidly degrading state of our environment. After a near drowning accident in which she was temporarily paralyzed, Liz Cunningham crisscrosses the globe in an effort to understand the threats to our dazzling but endangered oceans. This intimate account charts her thrilling journey through unexpected encounters with conservationists, fishermen, sea nomads, and scientists in the Mediterranean, Sulawesi, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and Papua New Guinea. It is my pleasure to turn the podium over to Liz Cunningham.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here at the New England Aquarium, and I'm especially grateful to Elizabeth Stevenson for bringing me here. Elizabeth and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other better over the last week, and today we drove into Boston, and on the way I was thinking about my thoughts for tonight, and I thought of something I realized I really should begin my talk with, which is that whenever I stand up to speak, I always think of the words of Frederick Turner, and he talks about what real beauty is, and that beauty exists at the edge because it has nothing to lose and everything to give away. And I remember when I read those words, I thought, God, I'm going to write like that. And every time I stand up to speak, I think, God, I want to speak like that. And when I was finishing Ocean Country, I read this story about an Aboriginal myth that the true gift can only be fully received if you give it away, that the gift needs to keep moving. And I was like, wow, that's what's happening here. I'm not writing a book. It felt more like a transmittal, like I was writing this long, very long letter to everybody. But it's still like this incredible situation to be introduced. I'm Liz Cunningham, the author of Yada Yada, and I'm going to tell you about my book about the oceans, but also about environmental hope for our environment in the future. I mean, if I were sitting where you're sitting, and I came to an event like this tonight, and somebody stood up and said, I'm going to talk about hope for our environmental future, and I hadn't been through everything that I've been through in the last 5 years, I'd be very likely to think, no matter what you say, I'm not sure I'm going to believe you. So I want to thank you for your curiosity and your attention. And what I want to do is tell you some stories. I want to tell you some stories about some of the amazing people that I met. Because I didn't find hope. What I found was people who showed me what hope can be. So as you all know, I was in a terrible accident in the ocean in a kayak, and I was almost killed. And after that accident, I didn't feel like I could go back to the life I was living before. So for over a decade, I struggled with injuries from the accident. I earned my keep as a freelance editor. I drafted ideas for children's books. I wrote poetry. But over time, I realized something. I realized that even though the ocean had almost killed me, even though it almost dished me up as chum, and even though it still terrified me at times, I loved it. I always loved it. It was one of the greatest passions in my life. So I thought, well, hello, why not combine that passion with your work as a writer and write about the ocean? So I was really jazzed up about this. This was a big deal. But there was this other thing going on. There was this feeling that had haunted me ever since the kayak accident. You know, I go out and have a glass of wine with friends and say I can't describe it, so I called it the thing. It was this wild, beautiful feeling. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew that in starting to write about the ocean, I was also trying to figure that out. In 2011, I started research for this book. So I figured, hey, I'm a journalist. I know what I'm doing. I had no idea what I was getting into. The first thing I didn't understand was how absolutely essential water is to almost every aspect of life on our planet. This picture, thank God my clicker's working. This picture, I see this picture differently now. If you and I were standing on the moon, and you said, hey, what's that over there? I'd say to you, that's ocean country. Because there is no life on this planet without water. And almost all of it, 97%, is in the ocean. I mean, even me right now, I'm taking deep breaths between my phrases, so I'm not asphyxiated by the end of my talk. Those breaths, every breath I take, every breath you take, over 50% of the oxygen in every breath we take, that comes from marine plants and algae in the ocean. That's over every other breath. So I didn't understand the degree to which the ocean is a life support system. The other thing I didn't understand was how much damage we were doing. I saw beautiful coral reefs like this in the Turks and Caicos Islands within a week's time turn into this. This is coral bleaching. It's caused by climate change, by warming seas, overfishing, and pollution. I traveled to West Papua New Guinea, the marine biodiversity epicenter of the world, and you'd be swimming along in a reef like this, and it's just overflowing with life, and all of a sudden, you get to an edge, and it looks like this. This is dynamite fishing, where fishermen, they make explosives out of fertilizer and matches or bundles of dynamite. They light them, they throw them in the reef, it explodes, it obliterates the reef, and then they go down and they pick up all the dead fish. And all this time I've been doing research and interviews, and one thing kept coming up, that we are on the verge of a global fisheries collapse. That yes, there are some pockets of well-managed fisheries around the world, but the bottom line is we're on the verge of a global collapse. And one statistic kept coming up. The populations of large fish like tuna, cod, marlin, swordfish, these populations were down 90% since 1950. And when I heard this, I thought, this was somehow unbelievable to me. But when I was in places like this, then I thought, okay, now I believe it. This is real. This is a village in Southeast Asia, in Sulawesi, called Mantigola. The day I spent there was one of the most unforgettable days of my life. I saw there how people, like many people around the world, they depend on their catch from the sea to survive. And a fish was like a metric, like a unit of measure, like a potato before the Irish potato famine. Because the number of people around the world who depend on seafood for their primary source of protein, that number is over 2 billion people. The United Nations estimates it at over 2.6 billion people. And for many of these people, it's not just their primary source of protein. Like the people in this village, it's their primary source of food. And when you take that fact, and you put that fact side by side with the fact that we're on the verge of a global fisheries collapse, you have a massive crisis. Before we left the village, I was with my translator, Ricardo Saliki. And before we left the village, we stopped at this dock and we talked with these kids. And I looked into this little girl's eyes and I thought, what is the world going to be like when you're my age? How are people going to eat? Because when you factor in climate change, what does it mean? It means more droughts, more severe droughts. That means more food shortages, more severe food shortages. It means more flooding, it means more cyclones. It means what I'd read, what I'd heard, what people told me. And if you'd asked me before I visited this village, if you'd asked me, do you get this, do you understand it? I would have said, no, I've read it, I understand. And if you had pushed me, and said, hey, do you get this? I would have pushed back. I would have said, no, I get it. But it hadn't registered. Not the way it registered that day in this village. And what it was is this. We need to take decisive action because we are on the verge of not only the greatest environmental catastrophe in history, we are on the verge of the greatest humanitarian catastrophe in history. I took this photo when we were leaving the village. We were out on the open water and we were headed into a storm in order to get home. And being out on the open water like that and heading towards a storm, you could just feel the vulnerability and the scarcity on your skin. Things had changed. I'd been searching for hope for the oceans, for the creatures of the sea. Now I was also searching for hope for humanity. But even in this place, even in this really remote place, things were starting to change. This is a fisherman named Ansi Wahab. He and his friend Dorman had started a fishermen's collective in which all the fishermen had agreed not to dynamite fish and to only use sustainable methods. And a number of these collectives had formed in this area. They called them fishermen's forums. I met with Ansi Wahab and all the fishermen. And when Ansi Wahab explained to me why they had formed the collective, he said, we do this for our children. We do this so our children will have fish to eat. And he said it with such pride and dignity. But it was really only a couple days later that I really started to understand the depth of that dignity. And what happened was I did another interview with another fisherman, except this time that fisherman said to me, I will only speak to you anonymously. He explained to me that when you walk away from dynamite fishing, you take a huge pay cut. Dynamite fishing, it pays like $85 to $170 a day. Sustainable methods, $5, $40 a day. He told me that the bombs were terribly dangerous because the fuses are so short that one friend was killed, another lost an arm, one was blinded in one eye. And the dynamite, a lot of the dynamite is black market dynamite that comes from a big boss in Singapore. And the dynamite and the fish run through the same organized crime networks that run narcotics. So when these fishermen made their choice, they not only took a huge pay cut, but they had the courage and the dignity to stand up and walk away from organized crime. On my last day of interviews in Sulawesi, I met with these villagers, and they too had formed a collective. I knew I was headed home, and so I asked them, I said, is there anything you would like me to tell people when I go back to the United States? I will be speaking with audiences. Is there anything you would like me to tell them? And one fisherman said, yes. He said, please tell them to eat sustainable seafood. It's not cheap, it costs more, but if we're not all willing to do this, there will be no fish left in the sea. And you know, these issues are so big, they can be so overwhelming, but I realized you start where you are, and you start with what you care about. And I cared about the ocean, and I cared about these people. So I said, okay, I'm gonna make sustainable seafood a focus. I went home. My next area of research was the Mediterranean, so I started doing Skype calls, emails, all that stuff. And there's all these people telling me, there's this amazing woman in Paris, she's doing incredible work with French chefs. And French chefs are a big deal because they have their hand on a big spigot of influence. They can have a big ripple effect all around the world. And I'm like, okay, Paris, I mean, I'd love to go to Paris, but really, I mean, I didn't get it. But I just kept hearing it. So finally I said, okay, when I go to the Mediterranean, I will take the train and I will go up to Paris. This is Elizabeth Ballet. She is the director of SeaWeb Europe in Paris. Elizabeth explained to me that if you really want to make sustainable seafood work, you have to do one thing. You have to work with what she called every actor in the supply chain. So she didn't just work with French chefs, she worked with fishermen, retailers, wholesalers, culinary schools. To make this work, she said, everyone in the supply chain, everyone in the chain needs to be engaged. Everyone has a role to play. But she did take me to meet a French chef. This is Francois Pasteur, and Elizabeth and I, we went to his restaurant and we sat and we chatted before he started to cook lunch. Francois explained to me that he used to make this fantastic bluefin tuna burger, a sushi burger. And it was one of his customers' favorite dishes. They came from all over to have it. But then he started to learn more about bluefin tuna. He learned what magnificent creatures they were, that they migrate thousands of miles. But then he learned that bluefin tuna were down 96%. And in some parts of the world, they were down to 1 or 2% of pre-industrial levels. Francois thought, how can I serve this fish if it's being hunted to extinction? So in 2007, Francois decided, I'm not going to serve bluefin tuna anymore. And at that time, there were many, many people working all around the world to save bluefin, but the numbers just kept going down. This is that gigantic fish market in Tokyo, the one that is the size of 43 football fields, and these are frozen bluefin. What drives the bluefin fishery is big money. One bluefin can go for over $500,000. They're hunted with these like spotter helicopters and high-tech military harpoons, and those are launched from these massive freezer boats. The black market is huge. Even the mafia is in on it. The corporate conglomerate, Mitsubishi, started buying up more bluefin and freezing it because they figured, hey, you know what? We can stockpile it, and then we can sell it for astronomical prices once it goes extinct. This was considered the most hopeless fishery in the world. So how do you save it? I mean, how do you get people to care about bluefin tuna? I mean, how many children fall asleep at night clutching a bluefin plush toy? But the day that I sat with Elizabeth in Francois' restaurant, that day was in the fall of 2012. 5 years after Francois had said, I'm not going to serve bluefin anymore. And something had happened. Some of the bluefin populations had stopped going down, and they had like ticked up a little bit. And it's like, huh? What? And I knew this when I was doing the interview with Francois. And you know, we're doing the interview, I have all my recording devices out, and we're talking. And Francois, he's telling me, well, hey, it's not just bluefin that he makes choices about. That he buys local food. He works to minimize food waste. He tries to have good team energy with his staff. And I was sitting there and I was listening to Francois, and you know how like you can be mulling something over and then suddenly you get in the shower, you're driving, and suddenly you just get it? Well, I was sitting there and I was listening to Francois, and all of a sudden I just went like this. I went blink and blink. All those people all around the world working to save bluefin. They just didn't know it could add up. I interviewed one of the world's experts on bluefin tuna, Sergei Tadela, and I asked him, what happened? He said, we didn't quit. The fishmongers who stopped selling it, the mega retailers who stopped buying it, the chefs who stopped serving it, the customers who refused to eat it, all the people working on like quota reductions, moratoriums, marine protected areas, the protests, the petitions, all those people, they didn't quit. But this is all like flying around in my head, right in the middle of the interview with all this stuff going on. So I grabbed a notebook and I jotted something down. I jotted down, even if you can't do the math, don't quit. And then I thought, is this what's going on with our environmental future? So many people working around the world, but will it add up? And the way I see this now, it's like a bucket brigade. It's like a bucket chain, because the efforts are linked. And the power and the efficacy of the chain comes through the linkage. And what Elizabeth Ballet had to tell me about supply chains, that applies here in spades. Everyone in the chain needs to be engaged. Everyone has a role to play. So this is a piece of that chain. This is a piece of that bucket chain. These are some folks at the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, California. They're releasing a sea lion that they rescued. if you asked me for the one thing that taught me the most about hope, I'd tell you it was contact with these people. The Marine Mammal Center has over 1,000 volunteers. They treat over 1,000 animals a year. They can't say them all. No matter what they do, they can't say them all. But they have the courage to live with that and treat every new animal that comes in with renewed care and focus. They brought to life for me the ideas of the philosopher Joanna Macy when she writes about what she calls active hope. Hope, she says, is not something that you have. Hope, she says, is something that you do. And they brought to life the words of David Orr when he writes, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. So I started to see this as this. These people, their sleeves are rolled up. They're not calculating the odds. They know hope's not a guarantee. But yet I wonder, like, God, what makes these people tick? I mean, what drives them, what sustains them? And I could see, like, okay, I see the Marine Mammal Center folks. I see that. But I realized, you know what? I don't have a way to think about this. And then I remembered something. I remembered something that my great uncle used to say often. And when I remembered it, it was like retrieving a long-lost puzzle piece. My great uncle Kurt Hahn was the founder of Outward Bound. And when he was very old, he said one thing often. He said, the passion for rescue releases the highest dynamic of the human soul. And when I remembered that, I was like, of course, the Marine Mammal Center folks, and of course, the lucky chain, and of course, the thing, the wild, beautiful feeling that had haunted me ever since the kayak accident. So for a moment, let me tell you what happened in this accident. I was in a whitewater kayak off the California coast, and I was surfing waves. And I suddenly felt something at the stern of my kayak, and I looked up, and I'm trying to find a measure here, but it was about 2 stories high. It was a rogue wave about 2 stories high behind me. And that's the last thing I remember. And I had a concussion, and when I came to, I was upside down in the kayak with my head facing the bottom of the water. And to release yourself from a whitewater kayak, there's a neoprene spray skirt that holds your torso into the kayak. And to get out of the kayak, you need to pull on a cord at the front of it, and then pull that skirt off, and then push your hips out of the kayak. So I went to do it, and my back had been injured when I was hit by the rogue wave, and my arms were paralyzed. So I'm there, I'm like my head is just like, I feel like my body's like a rag doll inside this washing machine. And my head is like thrashing like a fish in a bucket. This can't be happening, please, I'll do anything. And it was just unbelievable. It was. And then finally I realized, wow, I'm dying. And I went away into a place where I had no sense of vision. So it wasn't like a dream world. And I heard a voice. And the voice said, do you want to live? And I said, yes. And just as I said yes, it was like someone had turned a strobe on, like I was back in a washing machine, and my eyes bolted open, and I had pain running down my arms, and I was, oh my God, I've got feeling in my arms. And I groped forward, I grabbed the skirt, I pulled it off, and thank God I had a life preserver, because I was at the surface bobbing, just wheezing incredibly, coughing up water out of my lungs. So that, yes, that was a passion for rescue. But that's not the mystery. That's not what haunted me. What haunted me was, it was a yes I could never have imagined I had inside myself. I mean, I was toast. I had no feeling. I had no air. I bargained. I denied. I accepted I was dying. I was out of pain. I'd passed the point of no return. So I was like, what's with that question? And what's with that yes? When I really looked inside myself as deeply as I could, and I asked, what's the essence of that yes? I asked myself, okay, what is it? My answer was this. It was, I'm not done yet. This isn't over. And I see a parallel, yes, in that bucket chain of people working around the world to save our planet and to make it more just. And I see them working, even though the odds suck at times, even though the clock on the issues is ticking louder and louder, what I see is, we're not done yet, and this isn't over. So this is another piece of our bucket chain. These are some of the amazing people that I write about. I think of them as the faces of ocean country. They taught me that the heart of hope is a passion for rescue. That it's not about asking, is there hope? It's about asking, how can I become it? And I have this picture across from my desk every day so I see it. Because whenever I look at this, I hear their voices. I hear Ansi Wahab when he says, we do this for our children. I hear Joanna Macy when she says, hope is something that you do. I hear Elizabeth Ballet, everyone has a role to play. And I hear Sergei Tadela when he told me, we didn't quit. But if I were the woman I was before I went through all of this, and I came here, and I just heard all of this, everything I just said, the whole spiel, I'd think, okay, this is a lovely speech, but these issues are too big. Climate change, mass extinction, they're too big. They're too systemic, and they are too enmeshed in our economy. But the woman I am today is riveted by history, because I look back and I see the anti-slavery movement. I look back, I see the civil rights movement. I see the women's rights movement, and I see that they all took on systemic issues that were completely enmeshed in our economy. And these movements are unfinished, but they've changed innumerable lives, and they've changed our world. So if there's one thing that I can give you from everything that I've seen and learned, the one thing I want to give away, it's this, that the equations by which we calculate our lives, by which we respond to events, to challenges, by which we calculate daily, is there success today or failure? Is there hope or hopelessness? There's one thing we need to remember about these equations. And that thing, that something, it can be the difference between life or death, between a better future or a terribly degraded future, between saving a creature or losing it to extinction. And that thing, that something, that thing to remember, it's the wild, beautiful puzzle piece. It's the thing that says, we're not done yet. It's the thing that says, even if you can't do the math, don't quit. Thank you very much. So now I have the great pleasure of introducing Elizabeth Stevenson. And I want to tell, we have some stories about how we met. Somehow we ended up on the phone, I thought I was going to write a check and it was all taken care of. See where that got us. So no phone calls. So I want to talk a little bit about why, who, what, where, when, and why. And so I was, as you can see, very moved by what I saw in the developing world. And I thought, because ocean country is very much so a call for hope, that I wanted the book itself as an economic entity to roll up its sleeves and do a little something. And I was very aware that 21% of every breath we take is oxygen. And I thought, gee, that's a nice fat little number. So why don't we give that away? And then I'll have that right on the tip of my tongue, because oxygen is a big deal. We can go, without food for days, water for some time, oxygen. I learned from high school students today, 3 minutes. So I contacted Elizabeth, and here, I've been looking for a place to give those royalties away, someplace that was working in the developing world, small-scale, community-based grants. And MCAF was just like, bingo, this is just so absolutely perfect. And so it was the perfect match, but I never imagined that we would begin collaborating in the way that we have, and that I would never imagine to now introduce her in such a way, which is basically, I want to tell you that I feel that my entire speech is the introduction, and I am now going to pass the podium to another amazing person who's going to tell us another group of amazing stories about other amazing people in the bucket chain.
Thank you, Liz. You might think it's hard to go after Liz with such an inspiring talk, but in fact, I get to sit here and get inspired all the way up to the top of my head and ready to go to tell you some more stories. So, as Liz mentioned, MCAF is a program that supports projects all around the world and is also a reflection of the Aquarium's commitment to ocean research and conservation, not just in our backyard here, but all around the world. And so here's a map of the projects that MCAF has funded since 1999. And the great oceanographer and ocean conservationist, Dr. Sylvia Earle, has a term she's coined called hope spots, which she uses to describe places in the ocean that have been set aside and protected. But I like to call the dots on this map here hope spots as well. And that is because of the people, as Liz said, the people that are part of the bucket chain that are working in these areas of the world against all odds. So I'm going to introduce you to 4 of those people tonight in just a few minutes. The first is Dr. Ruth Laney, who with her work on sawfish species throughout Africa and beyond is truly racing extinction with unyielding determination. Now, sawfish are funny-looking creatures. They are aptly named, as you can see. And as you can also see here, not only do they make an easy catch, by people wanting to catch them, but they get very easily entangled in fishing gear because of their defining feature, their saw-like rostrum, which is also sought for trophy hunters as well, and for religious ceremonies. The first step in saving these animals, because they are so rare now, particularly throughout Africa and other parts of the world, you have to find them first and make sure they're still in existence. And the way Ruth is doing that is she's going around and speaking to fishermen. This is work that we have supported her doing in a couple of different places, and finding out where the last sightings were of sawfish. Now, this is not easy work. Ruth has said it's very lonely work, going from place to place. This is not the glamorous career she envisioned as a little girl, thinking about being on beaches and having encounters with manta rays, and because her species is rare, she doesn't get a lot of encounters. And she spends a lot of her time in dealing with bureaucracies and getting permits. Recently, the government changed over and she had to do it all over again. And then she spends a lot of her time knee-deep in mud. And this is because the juvenile habitat for sawfish is in mangroves. So she spends a lot of her time wading through mud, dealing with all this. So you might ask, why would she be doing this? And this is what she has to say. If the protection of the most endangered family of sharks and rays on the planet does not ignite a strong sense of purpose, what would? And Ruth is also getting energy and moving forward by the fact that she has seen a change. She helped organize the first ever workshop on softfish conservation in the country of Mozambique. And she used the data that she collected from her MCAP-supported project to help make decisions around softfish conservation in that country. So she forges ahead with all the challenges that she faced. I saw a recent Facebook post from her that she had just, for the 6th time, gone to get her visa and also gone back to try to get the permits to be able to study these animals. So she spends a lot of her time doing that, but she forges on because she does not give up. So the next project I want to speak to you about occurs in Iran. And we don't get to hear a lot of happy, positive news coming out of Iran. Most of it's focused on the political tensions between our countries and sanctions and nuclear deals. So it's my pleasure tonight to introduce you to a great story and 3 amazing people, Nazanin Mohsenian, Hamid Moshiri, and Nagar Gadimi, who together launched, and with support from MCAP, the first marine mammal strategy network in the country of Iran. And thanks to their efforts, community members such as these firemen are now trained to respond to marine animals in distress and to help save them. And for the animals that it's too late to save, they're collecting key data on the causes and on their genetics, doing very important studies that are groundbreaking for the region. And I don't know if anybody else has ever tried to send money to Iran, but it's actually not very easy to do. We went through that process and tried to send the wire out as we normally do, and tried a couple times, and then the State Department contacted the Aquarium and said, don't try that again. We were naive, a little naive, and so we found out that we had to go through this long bureaucratic process to make that happen and get a special permit to send money to Iran to prove it was for good purposes. And so the question naturally came about, do we want to do this? Do we want to go through this process? There are no guarantees we're going to get the permit in the end. And, you know, it's marginally controversial. And I'm happy to say, and proud of my institution to say, that the answer was a resounding yes. Yes for the potential for this project to make a difference. Yes for the amazing people involved. Yes for it even making a small difference in bridging a divide between these two countries. And yes, because few others are willing to fund projects there, and these amazing people are part of the Bucket Brigade, and they need our help. And as Nagar Gadimi says, she says it was a miracle. That's how she describes it. She says, miraculously, people from different parts of the world, from Canada, USA, and Iran, trust and believe in each other, and they changed a simple idea to a reality. And now we are proud and grateful to have supported a project led by people who have now become our friends. Hamid and Nagar came to visit us last June for World Oceans Day at the Aquarium. And Nazanin, sadly, who's their chief scientist, was not able to join them, but Hamid brought her back in an aquarium fleece, which you can see her wearing proudly there in their office. So this visit only forged stronger bonds between all of us that I know will continue long into the future. And they're not only making communities of hope across countries, but within their own country. They're creating hope for the future by educating children, telling them about the wonders of marine mammals that exist in their backyard, the Persian Gulf. And that's Nazanin there in the foreground smiling. She's the chief scientist, but spends lots of her time out at these local schools talking to children many of them are the children of fishermen, about marine mammals. And they have made storybooks for children and coloring books for them to learn about these animals. Hamid recently sent me this picture that he and Nazanin were out on their field work, and they came onto the beach, and a number of the children they've worked with came rushing over. They just happened to be there, and they were so excited to see them, and we're talking all about conservation and marine mammals, and you can see Hamid there is wearing his New England Aquarium fleece that he purchased when he was here. So that, again, a pleasure to share that great story. And the next story I have for you is about bridging divides, not across two nations, but across groups of people that don't always see eye to eye. This is Kirsten Forsberg. She recently spearheaded a collaborative effort to secure full protection for manta rays in the country of Peru. If you pick up your copy of the MCAF newsletter out there, you can read all about it. It would take me an evening and more to describe the incredible effort that went into this for her and the amount of bridge building she did. But one of the most important things she did was build strong relationships with fishermen. And all these fishermen you see here now work with her on her research and ecotourism initiatives. In ecotourism, because as it turns out, a manta ray is worth about $500 dead in a fishing net and about $1 million to ecotourism annually. So the gentleman on the upper left, Wilmer, is now the field operations director for Kirsten's research operations in the north of Peru. And these relationships that Kirsten had with the fishermen became extremely important when this happened. This was about a year ago. Many of you may have seen it. This was before it was illegal to catch manta rays. And this image was all over the media. It was all over social media. This manta ray strung up on this crane that was captured incidentally, 25 feet across. And one of the fishermen who helped bring it in, Edgardo Cruz, was quoted in the media, so his name was out there. And he was just vilified on social media. People harassed him on his phone. He had to change his number. He had to go into hiding. People were so angry about this. And Kirsten Forsberg, being the bridge builder that she is, she reached out to her strong network of fishermen and she said, connect me with Edgardo. And she reached out to Edgardo and she said, come work with us. Come be part of our team. And she said, take scientists out to see the manta rays and help with our ecotourism initiative. So I'm happy to say that Edgardo, although he looks a little somber in that picture, now wearing his Planeta Oceano t-shirt with two of their interns there, has joined the Planeta Oceano team. And he did take scientists out to see manta rays. And he said, if I could do this all the time and give up fishing, I would do it in a heartbeat. So admittedly, Kirsten told me this story offhand when I was recently with her, as if it was just part of her average day. And I said, that's a fantastic story. I have to share that. And I said, what is your secret? Because she does this everywhere with so many different people and so many different groups. And she said, a critical thing is listening to others have to say, learning from them and trying to understand their position. It is also important to fully understand that these things will take time to develop. So with those words of wisdom, I want to move on to my final ocean hero, who is also very similarly bridging divides. In this case, this is Mark Ward. He's the director of Sea Turtles Forever in Costa Rica. And you can see him there with his red headlamp on. He goes out every night at the sea turtle nesting season and waits for mother sea turtles to lay their eggs, and then, if necessary, moves the eggs to hide them from poachers or camouflages the nest so they're not visible to poachers. And this is arduous work and just backbreaking work, in addition to everything else he's also doing with the program. And he's been doing it for years, since like 1999. And I said to him, what keeps you going? And he said, the work that he's done with turning poachers, people who would take the eggs and eat them or sell them, into conservationists, has been like turning sinners into saints, to use his words. And he says that has fueled him. So here's a picture of Arnaldo, who was a champion poacher. And he eventually, what happened with the poachers is the Sea Turtles Forever team got so good that they realized, can't beat them, join them. And Mark also reached out to them and said, we'll pay you. Don't be a poacher anymore. Guard the nests from other poachers, since who better to guard the nest than a poacher? And he gladly came on, became one of their best monitors and protectors of nests. And I've mentioned this story elsewhere before, and I thought, I should check back in with Mark and find out what's happened with Arnaldo and make sure as I'm telling this story that And so I said, how is he doing? And he said, well, he's driving a taxi in San Jose now. But he did not return to poaching, and he said that he trained another poacher to take his place, but he had to move to be closer to his family. And then he went on to tell me about so many other stories of poachers that they're now working with. This young man is the son of a former poacher who is now working proudly with their team. And so I asked Mark, I said, how did this come about? What was your foot in the door? And he said that at one point he noticed all this monofilament line, all these nets and lines left in the reef. And he said, I'm gonna go clean that out. And he just tons of it, just pulled it off the reef. And what started happening was people, first of all, thought he was crazy. All the people thought he was crazy, and the poachers were also mad at him for taking money away from him for poaching. So he was not a popular person. But after he did this, the reef started coming back to life. And the lobsters started returning to the reef, and the fishing was better. And he felt better because he did actually feel bad about taking this income from the sea turtle eggs from people who live hand to mouth. And so now they had a better income from fishing lobsters off the reef than they would have with poaching the sea turtles. And some of the poachers have learned from him about, now they charge tourists. The poachers take tourists out to watch a hatching of a nest. And so they too, like the manta ray situation, are benefiting from ecotourism instead of harvesting these animals. The other thing that Mark has done, is one of my favorite pictures, is they have gone around to, just like the Plan for the Land Society in Iran, they go around to 7 local schools. Again, this was part of what we supported them to do, and they make coloring books for kids and talk to kids about sea turtle conservation. He's told me that they actually now have somebody who's Costa Rican doing this job of Turtle Man, but that's back when Mark was Turtle Man himself. And that, he said, has made a huge difference. He said hardly anybody in the areas that they're working is going into poaching anymore, because first of all, they know they're out there guarding the nests. And secondly, they have been raised on this idea that turtles are important, they're not to be eaten, and you can make money off of them, but by inviting people to see them. So as I sum up here, I wanted to return to the Iran story briefly, and this is, again, Nagar Gadimi. She was one of the people who helped. She actually came up with the idea for the Stranding Network, and she has since moved to New Jersey with her family. And Liz and I spoke actually at the New York Times building about a week ago for an Outward Bound Peace Building event. And Outward Bound Peace Building brings people together from areas of conflict to help them understand each other better. And so they were very interested in having me come speak with Liz because the Aquarium had funded this project in Iran. And I thought it was a great example of peace building. And so when Nagar came, she said, I want you to know I've written a book about sustainability in Iran and also around the world. And which was fantastic, and she gave me a copy of the book, and I said, because it's in Persian, and I don't know Persian, and don't have a prayer of learning it anytime soon, I said, could you just translate the back for me so I kind of have a summary of what it's about? And I felt that the quote from the back was very fitting for what Liz and I are trying to do here tonight and sharing these stories with you. She says, although individuals may have less power compared to national and international organizations, in many cases their efforts can lead to tangible and positive change. Being indifferent would only increase problems and leave us with an uncertain future. I hope everyone who reads this book keeps hope in their heart and believes in their power to change things for the better. So before I leave you and Liz and I do questions, it's important for me to express deep gratitude to really the community of hope that keeps this great program going, because that's what it is. It takes a community to keep this program, this Marine Conservation Action Fund program going. And I do want to shout out to my own institution for being such a strong supporter of research and conservation around the world. The people who fund the program, individual donors, a number of you who are even here tonight, thank you so much for your support. Our committee, we have a committee of scientists that reviews all the proposals we receive, as well, of course, our fellows and grantees doing this work around the world. I also want to acknowledge the Women Working for Oceans group that has a table here tonight. If you're feeling inspired by what you have heard and want to know what about local actions you can take, Women Working for Oceans is a fantastic group that partners with the Aquarium, and they, in my mind, embody the idea of active hope. So please stop by their table before you head out after you get your signed copy. And lastly, I want to thank Liz Cunningham for just being an amazing friend to me and to MCAF, and for both generously and gently insisting that I share the stage with her on our little tour that we've been on recently, talking about the book and MCAF. So thank you again for coming, and we have time for just a couple of questions before we head out. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions? Okay. Yes, thanks.
Liz, I'm just wondering, you seem like there's a spirituality to your whole persona. Is there something about the oceans that makes you think about more than just the physical and
it's complicated.
Oh, yes, I have to repeat the question, sorry.
Oh, sure, yeah. So, in a nutshell, Liz, you seem a bit spiritual about your relationship with the ocean, and is there something very special about the ocean, would you say, that stimulates that? Yeah, and I think really in the end, personally, I grew up in a Jewish, half Christian family, so I was very aware of conflict over religion, and I've been very sensitive to that ever since. So it's been a very interesting thing, and that whole process as well. So I am a kind of multi-faceted person in terms of spiritual practices, to start off with. But I think that in the end, the place that ocean country took me was a convergence of spirituality with science, which is that extremely powerful, archaic, mysterious pull of the ocean was, this is life. This is really life. And so it definitely converged on me that you're flying through the solar system and you go, well, where's life? The most abundant place right now that we know of is here. And that's one of the main reasons is because of water. So I definitely saw that as well. I certainly, before I went through this journey, I don't think I appreciated community and the way I connect to people now. And my favorite story was, I was in the south of France, and I walked into an area where there was some dive equipment, and I had an ice cream cone, and I offered the woman, I said, do you want some, total stranger? And she went and grabbed a spoon, and she gingerly started taking the ice cream out of my cone, and all of a sudden I thought, God, I feel like I'm in Sulawesi. And then I thought, oh, my heart cracked open, wide open there. And so I think that was a very large change in me through that process, and I would call that spiritual. You can call it something else.
Oh, yes.
So thanks for coming and sharing. There's people like Eleanor Ostrom who've done really awesome work with how collective self-management of renewable resources can happen and work, and I think there's a lot of places around the world that are starting to do that really well. Then there's like the U.S. side of it. We're just so separated from the resources, from like we have buying habit decisions, but we're also in places where like you have to be a certain kind of person to care, and you have to be a certain kind of person to be able to afford to care, just financially. And there's huge parts like, this is totally separate, but like the single largest contributor to greenhouse gases in the United States is the dairy industry.
Yes.
And like there are these major other systems, like do you see hope when you look up to industrialized countries as well, and not just the actual resource management itself, but like, we're still the ones buying fish.
So are we going to do rocks, paper, scissors about who gets to answer
Oh, no, you
this?
get to answer that. You can answer that, but yeah, just want to repeat
Okay,
the question.
I'm going to do it in a nutshell. Just raise your hand or something if I'm not getting it right, because I'll try and say that I certainly am with you on this, exactly, which is that and I noticed in my travels, I almost thought, boy, gee, couldn't the U.S. get a clue? Because all around the world you see, like, I think in Amsterdam, you cannot sell a fossil fuel car. In 2025, you will not be able to sell a new fossil fuel car in Holland. It's a law now. And so I think what you're saying is that in the United States, where we are much wealthier than most of the rest of the world, that we have not rolled up our sleeves as much. Would you say that's correct? Yeah. One thing I will say about this is that the fishermen in Sulawesi did not react till they ran low on fish. And Holland, Amsterdam, sea level rises right in their face. So I feel that one of the things that we certainly are aware of, and you were totally correct about, is that we're a little bit clueless compared to other countries. But I think the other thing is we should not underestimate people's abilities to react to crises. And I think that's one thing that we are not seeing is, I look at my Facebook feed at night and I think, I can't look at this before going to sleep because it's just one catastrophe after another. But we need to focus on that capacity building. And I think that that's really important to keep in mind because of the truth that you're pointing to.
I think because it's, the evening's gotten rather late, you guys have been all wonderfully patient for this rather long, to listen to both of us so nicely. I'm thinking maybe we should adjourn for the book signing and then you can ask your questions of Liz. But before I lose you, I do want to say, if you were intrigued about the story of the sawfish, Ruth Laney, I'm excited to announce, will be here this summer, the week of July 18th, speaking on July 21st about her work on sawfish. She is a Marine Conservation Action Fund Fellow, which is a new program we have to bring our grantees here to the aquarium. So thank you again for coming, and hopefully we'll see you.